I mean, it's been a long time in coming here to Washington for his Washington debut. So let's give it up for the Washington National Opera, the Kennedy Center. Thank you so very much, Tim O'Leary, for introducing me earlier. Thank you, Warren Williams, for all of the great work that you've done in making this production a reality. And I am going to introduce our guest today for this panel, and I think I'm going to introduce you. Now, forgive me if I get it mixed up. I'm going to do it in what I think might be age order. So now, Tim introduced me first. That means I'm the youngest, but we're going to go younger than me. We have Taisha Bates here. How are you doing, Taisha?
I'm good.
Yeah, she is a 19-year-old aspiring entrepreneur who loves to write and create art. She is a published author with Shout Mouse Press. Give it up for Shout Mouse Press. She has co-authored 2 titles, The Day Tajon Got Shot in 2017. We'll be hearing a little bit more about that soon. And What It Cost Us, Stories of Pandemic and Protest in D.C., soon to be released next month. No, April 2000.
April 4th.
Yeah, okay, yes, next month. Taisha also wants readers to know that when things get hard, you can still persevere and find things that make you happy so that you can just keep on pushing. Welcome, Taisha. All right, Aaron Crouch. tenor extraordinaire, I might say. An artist and an activist hailing right here from this area, Bowie, Maryland, went to Suitland High School. He has been described as vividine, both vocally and as an actor. He is a graduate of the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music in Pennsylvania. And, you know, during the pandemic, you know, we talk about we are creative people. He started his own docu-series called, I'm going to spell it. Okay, I will say it first, but then I'm going to spell it because I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. But what the fuck? F-A-C-H. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Close.
Oh, F-A-C-H. Okay, what's the correct pronunciation?
Fuck.
What the fuck? See, I don't know opera, and I don't know libretto and all that, so I'm sorry. Kennedy Center, don't throw me out. Okay,
enough.
What the fuck?
It's close enough, close enough.
Okay. A series on YouTube where he performs repertoire traditionally sung by different voice types. Congratulations to that. Okay, so this is where it gets kind of queasy. I'm going to go with Kenneth Kellogg next. Praised for his commanding stage performance, and if you have not seen Blue yet, you won't know what I'm talking about. How many folk have seen Blue yet? Okay, we're talking about a commanding stage presence and rich resonance bass. Kenneth was born and raised right here in D.C., hailing from Duke Ellington School of the Arts, began formal training there. His roles include just all of the staples you might know of in opera repertoires. I'm not even going to go through them. You can see them on the Kennedy Center's page there, but you know, if there's been an opera there, he has performed, sung, I don't know the correct word for it, in it. And I know that you did the title role in Mozart's Don Giovanni, you know, and so many more. Okay, Sherry. I wasn't sure here and there, but Sherry Davis Molock, Associate Professor of Clinical Psychology. And you know, this is important, particularly with respect to a production like this, because there are a lot of feelings and emotions that come out of a production like Blue. So her research at George Washington University includes risk and protective factors in suicide in African-American adolescents and young adults, mental health help in adults and adolescents, and developing suicide and HIV prevention programs in African-American faith-based communities. So she's really here to help us through some of these difficult issues that arise in Blue and just really help that healing process. And then last but not least, Ron Hampton, okay? And you know, you can't just paint everybody in one box. And when I first met Ron, I don't know how many decades ago it was, and I found out he was a police officer, I said, oh no, police? Me, social justice, community activist, in collaboration with the police. But let me tell you, it's been one of the most richest collaborations that I have ever had. Ron Hampton retired from the DC Metropolitan Police Department after 23 years of service as a community relations officer. He is reputed for his outstanding work with the citizens in the 3rd District Police District in DC, his crime prevention and community participation relations, extremely experienced in all aspects of policing. He is the Executive Director Emeritus of the National Black Police Association and involved with many other policing organizations, locally, nationally, and internationally. So let's give it up for our panel. Okay, so we're going to get right to it. I'm going to start with you, Kellogg, if I may. I understand that the story of Blue is an extremely personal one for you. You have a son yourself, so playing the role as the father in Blue comes naturally. But what about the role as the father who is also a police officer? Can you talk to us a little bit about just how you came to grips with that phenomena and what you would want the audiences to come away with? And I just want to mention one other thing, and then I'm going to shut up. This opera was commissioned pre-George Floyd. So George Floyd had not even happened at that point, and now we're in the post-George Floyd era. So I'm just curious about your reflections and observations as a personal father and as playing the role of a father in that capacity.
Yeah, it was. It's a difficult line to travel, being a father in your life and being a father having to deal with the murder of my son in the opera. My son was in the first. He was in the first show we did in Glimmerglass. So as I was singing about my son's, Aaron's death in the show, I was looking at my son in the audience or in the rehearsal room, having to deal with that duality of realities. But Blue came at a really pivotal moment for me as an artist. I was really frustrated that art wasn't speaking to the thing that was on our minds, dealing in society with the murder of black men and women. And it was frustrating to not be able to get that out in my art, to be traveling the world doing art that had nothing to say about what was really hurting me and causing all of these emotions to me was empty. And then I found out about the subject matter of Blue, and it changed my perspective of the power of art, to be able to speak to the human condition that we were all dealing with. So I was able to get out a lot of frustrations that I was dealing with as a black man in my art form.
I also recall that you got into your role by actually following or interviewing or talking to a former police officer or something along those lines. Tell us a little bit about that.
So Tazewell Thompson, in his writing Blue, he didn't have a lot of the police references. So he had a friend, a colleague at that point, Frank Riley, who was in a production, another production he worked with. So he asked Frank a lot of these questions just to fill a lot of his knowledge of what it meant to be an officer in blue, a black man in blue, which actually came from Frank, I believe. So at some point, like diving into this role, I knew what it was to be a father, but I didn't know what it meant to be a black man in blue. So Frank and we got together, and I got to ask him all the questions, all of the things that gets to the core of what it means to be a black man in blue. And we rode through DC. We rode through DC and talked a lot about what it meant to be a father. And I asked him a really difficult question, which I didn't understand, couldn't get into in a scene that I had in the opera, was what is it like going from civilian clothes to putting on a police uniform? So just those minute details in thinking and perspective were really important for me to get into. And I had that opportunity with Frank, and we still talk. We still call each other now and have conversations as men.
You know, that's interesting. You say going from street clothes to putting on that uniform. I know the first opening scene, if I can say this, in Blue, it's just that.
Yeah,
going from your street clothes to being an officer. And the first time I saw it, I've seen the opera twice so far. I wasn't quite I was wondering who you were, what was going to happen, and all like that. So that was, it was a real telling moment there. That was very profound.
It's an interesting scene as an actor. I mean, often on stage when you're acting, you're physically doing something, so you can ignore a lot of things. But that scene in particular, like just standing there, no music, absolutely still, with all of those eyes, you know they're judging you at some point. They're waiting for something to happen. They're waiting for you to do something. And it's that idea that when you see somebody first, you automatically make an assumption about what you know about them. And often clothes are that thing. The hoodie it's a big symbol in the piece, throughout the piece. So to stand there and know that Trayvon Martin was killed because he had a hoodie on, to stand there in absolute silence with the hoodie on and have all of these eyes peering at you, you feel, on some level, you feel the judgment. And you think about yourself, you think about what people are thinking about you, and it's a really powerful moment. And the transition of literally stripping down to my boxers, stripping that identity, and then putting on a whole new identity, which the world sees in a very different way. It's a very heady thing as an actor to experience that.
Profound and powerful. So let's turn now to your son, i.e. your stage son. The son, that's the title in the opera, Aaron Crouch. Not to sound cliche, my brother, but in a nutshell, can you just tell us what your origin story is? How is it that a little black boy growing up in Bowie, Maryland decided to sing opera? And what does taking on a role such as this mean to you?
Well, I always love telling this story. I wish my parents were here because they definitely are the main reason why I am here today. But both my parents are pastors, came from a really big family, have 5 older siblings, they all sing. So grew up singing in church, love singing gospel music. In middle school, I was like, okay, I think I want to be a singer. Suitland High School has a performing arts program. I apply for the program, get into the program, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be like Glee or High School Musical or something like that. And the first day, they're singing the national anthem in very classical chorus style, and I thought it was very corny. Definitely not my style, and I didn't even really want to go to the school at first because I wanted to go to my neighborhood high school with my middle school friends. But my mother was like, I went home to tell my mother that it was a classically based training that we would get at the school, thinking that would be the thing that would make her, agree with me that I should go back to my neighborhood high school. And man, I was so wrong. She's like, "Oh, you definitely staying now," because she said, "This is the best type of vocal training that you could get is classical training. You mean to tell me you're gonna get free voice lessons every week for the next 4 years? You staying?" And she said, "Even if you don't want to do opera, this is gonna help you in general." And man, I was very, very upset, of course. But I then ended up going to the Curtis Institute of Music, so I started liking it a little bit, I would say. And yeah, I've pretty much just been working since I graduated. And so absolutely 100% without a doubt, because of my parents' support and my parents just being able to see me as kind of already what I am now, even having barely scratched the surface of a professional career, my parents always saw this in me, and they always have been my biggest supporters. And when there were several people around me telling me that I couldn't do it or that I couldn't be special or stand out, my parents always saw that in me. And so I absolutely am here today because of them. And yeah, you definitely can clap for my parents. Absolutely, always take an opportunity to clap for my parents. But being in this show in particular is definitely an experience unlike anything else because I know I speak for a lot of my black colleagues in the classical music industry. This is for me personally, this is my first and only, I've been doing this show since the premiere in 2019, and this is my first and only opportunity to be in a fully black cast. And it really is as cool as if it seems cool to you, it is that cool. Like, because like, I spent so much of my life trying to be what I thought it meant to be an opera singer. You know, there is a uniform, there is a dialect, there's a way to speak, there's a way to carry yourself. You know, that has a lot of things to do with the issues that we have in America in general. And I didn't fit the part. I didn't talk like my other friends who were in it because their parents could afford to make them opera singers and pay for their voice lessons and things like that. And they didn't look like me. They didn't come from the same background as me, but man, we be in the stuff that we be doing in the rehearsals is just like, it just takes off the pressure of like putting on a mask to like fit in, because even though we all come from different walks of life as completely different black people, it's just like, we just have that sense of community that you just can't really explain it as anything other than that. And so it really is a huge blessing to be surrounded by these amazing artists and feel like I belong and like I don't have to try to fit in. And it's like, I don't really have a whole lot in common with the son in general and this character, but it's cool. Like, this character is black and I'm black. And it's like, I was a 16-year-old kid at one point, and like, yeah, like I could be this character. And so, yeah, it's just a huge blessing. I've been a part of this. I remember I was 19 years old and I got an email about being a part of a workshop for a show with Kenneth, Kellogg, and literally the rest is history. And it's taken me to some really amazing places and afforded me some really awesome opportunities. And so it's just been a huge pleasure and an amazing journey.
Aaron, it is all that. Thank you.
It is all that.
Thank you so very much for that. And I'm not quite sure how many folk in the audience know that this opera is based on contemporary events, but it was in fact inspired by literature. It was inspired by Ta-Nehisi Coates. When he was about that age, one of his books called Between the World and Me, that talked about his experiences at Howard University and talked about his experiences where a good friend of his was killed by police. And it was also inspired by the elder, James Baldwin, in his book, The Fire Next Time. So contemporary issues, traditional opera coming together, I mean, I consider it a win-win. And I'm so very glad that both you two were part of this, and so glad it was an all-black cast, as well as, what do you call it, the opera director? The conductor, right, see, yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna go on and move on. We'll just go right down well, not quite, because we're gonna switch up here, but Ron Hampton. Ron, okay, so based on your long-standing experience, both on and off the police force, and in light of the long-standing history of police violence in this country as relates to black people, what changes, and I know you're speaking personally for yourself, we're not speaking on behalf of the Washington National Opera or the Kennedy Center, but I'm just curious, just in general, what changes do you feel are needed to move forward in a manner that ensures the public safety of everyone?
Well, first of all, let me say good afternoon and compliment Kenneth and Aaron because what they had a chance to feel is something that I had a chance to feel for real, and it wasn't. It was difficult. If it was difficult for the actors and for the opera, then in real life it is. It really is difficult. A combination of things, Nkechi. You know, for real change to take place in our society, my college professors used to say you need social and political will. And there's always been social will for change to take place. That's how change usually starts, on the ground. The question is there political will for change? And see, America has an obsession with its policing, with its police power, with its criminal justice system. unfortunately, that obsession has bled over into the black community and the Hispanic community and some of the other communities. And so, for lack of a better term, they have drank the Kool-Aid. And so they believe what, in general, America believes about the need of policing or criminal justice system. I tell folk that it's my police career that has led me to believe that policing ought to be abolished. And that's hard for some people to believe. And I'm not necessarily saying abolished all, but abolished in the sense of looking at it from a research standpoint or a study standpoint about, is it meeting the needs of the people that it's supposed to serve and protect? And if it doesn't, then why doesn't it? And then what can we do to change it? And that hasn't happened. And so we're not really talking about the George Floyd. In the mean, we're also talking about Tyree Nichols. We're talking about Rodney King, because I didn't look at the video, but I heard it, and it reminded me immediately about Rodney King. And those dynamics that existed when Tyree Nichols existed in Rodney King. And the evidence that black police officers are involved in it is also evident that the bleed over has taken place or took place a long time ago. And Aaron touched on the reason for the bleed over, because the description of what successful policing from a content standpoint as well as from a personal standpoint is not that of somebody who looks like me. It's a picture of a white male police officer down in the locker room with his equipment and all that stuff on, and how many arrests he gets and all that is the picture that, or the description that you strive for. I didn't strive for that because I don't look like him. I didn't act like him. I didn't talk like him, and I didn't behave like him either. And I went there for a different purpose, and I maintained that throughout my time, that I was there for my purpose. See, if I could just digress for 1 minute. I went in the service in 1966 and went to Vietnam in '68. I was in the Air Force and came back. So I got my up-and-comings in the military. And during the time that I was in the military, we were still segregated. That's how old I am. But since Nkechi introduced us that way, I know you all figured out that I was probably the elder sitting here for a variety of reasons. Not just because I look young, but because I am old.
Seasoned.
But it taught me something that I brought with me when I decided to be a police officer. That wasn't my dream. I didn't dream that I wanted to be a police officer. I found myself doing that and taking advantage of it for a variety of reasons because I had something that I wanted to do. And my ability to do it, I figured out was in the police department, unlike I think young people do and have done, is that they don't study the origin of what it is that they're about to do, whether you're a police officer or an accountant. I don't think they actually go and do research. I did, and I understood what it was I was going in there. And so I went in there with an idea about what I wanted to do and the way I wanted to do it, and I understood that. And there are things that you had to do to prepare yourself for it. But it's very difficult, and it weighs on you. So you have to carve your path out and then stick to it. And there are challenging ways to do it. But change has come. It's just that it always come. A friend of mine, Lee Brown, who was the chief of police in Houston, Atlanta, and New York City, and the drug czar, he says change is evolutionary, not revolutionary. And what he was alluding to was the obsession that America has with its policing and criminal justice system. And that's what makes it so difficult to do. But I haven't given up. I don't know how much more time I have, but when I see movies or opera and movies like Teal and operas like Blue, and there are other pieces that have given me hope that an awareness is on us and in front of us, that we are, and the young people of our community and neighborhoods gives me hope that it's going to change. But we're the ones that need to get on board. They're already on board. Don't you believe that? They're not. They're on board, and I'm on board with them, really, you know. So.
And Ron, thank you. Let's give it up for that, because there is hope that change is coming, and change comes when we have productions such as this, which reaches out to broader communities. That's when change comes, when people can feel and touch and emote and put yourself in other people's footsteps. That's when real change comes. So thank you so very much for that. And Dr. Sherry, I'm going to just skip you for a moment, and I want to turn to Tiaja right now at this point. You know, Tiaja, I don't know, but, you know, ladies, we're not supposed to tell our age, but I'm just going to say, because I think you're young enough that you won't have a problem with telling your age, but you're 19 years old now, okay? And I'm just curious, this production started several years ago. You were with Shoutmouth Press a number of years ago. How old were you? What were the ages of you and your co-authors when you all co-wrote the book, The Day Tajon Got Shot, which actually, again, was published pre-George Floyd, so George Floyd had not even happened. And I know that we're going to hear a little later on a little excerpt from that co-authored book of yours from Shoutmouth Press, The Day Tajon Got Shot. But tell us about the ages that you all were, and also I'm just curious, what invited you as teenagers to focus on the issue of police brutality, you know, locally, as opposed to like the environment or health or food justice or whatever? Why the issue of police violence? Yeah.
So at the time that we started writing the book, I was 12 years old.
Ooh, did y'all hear that? Say that again. I want to make sure they caught that.
So at the time that we started writing the book, I was 12 years old, and I authored the book with 9 other people, and we were in the ages between 12 and 15. We really started writing the book because at the time, police brutality started to like gain more recognition. So videos started surfacing, like Eric Garner, Michael Brown, and other people that, like, you know, got affected by police brutality. And we thought that it would be a good idea to write like our perspective on what's happening in the world. So.
And what is it that you wrote about? What was The Day Tajon Got Shot? Just give us a little bit of a flavor. I know you're going to read from it later, but I think you all want to hear a little bit of a flavor of just what it was about, right? Okay.
So The Day Tajon Got Shot is about a young black boy who's 16, and he gets shot by a white cop. And we basically tell different perspectives of the community and how they were affected by the situation.
I'm just curious, which perspective did you have as a co-author of the book?
So I actually wrote Ashley, who's the cop's daughter.
Oh my goodness, the cop's daughter. This is very relevant to Blue because we have the central character being the son of the black police officer. I don't know if you want to reflect or share. I don't want. I'm just kind of curious. First of all, I'm not sure if you've seen Blue yet.
No.
Okay, I know you'll be seeing it, but just kind of curious. What were some of your thoughts as the daughter of a police officer in Tajon Got Shot?
At first, I had to kind of channel like my own personal experiences with my dad. So I am really close with my dad. So in the story, basically, Ashley is very close with her father, so anything he do, she doesn't really see no wrong. So it was kind of hard, kind of channeling, like, you know, a perspective from, like, a different race, kind of, like, I'm clearly not white. So it was kind of hard channeling that.
I'm sorry, I got to interrupt you for a moment. Yeah, I got to switch my head around because I still have blue. I still have blue in my mind that it was a black family, but the day Tajon, you're the daughter of the white cop who killed. Right. I had to reorient, so keep going. Thank you.
So basically, I just use my own personal feelings and thoughts with my dad and how I would react if he was in that situation.
Awesome. Awesome. We're going to have opportunity for Q&A in just a little bit, so I'm sure that there'll be some riveting questions around that. But let's go on and turn to Dr. Sherry. Dr. Sherry Davis Molock. There was a 2018 Harvard study that found that a police killing of an unarmed African-American triggered days of poor mental health for black people living in the state over the following 3 months. Does the persistent, systematic nature of police brutality and killings, does it take a psychological toll on black people and black communities? And if so, what can be done to mitigate the harm and help families, help communities heal?
So first, hello everybody, thank you for having me here. And I think that study is kind of a landmark study because it's one of the few studies of its kind that can look at this issue from a population base. So they took data that was gathered nationally, and they looked at how many people had a police brutality incident in their community, in their state. And then they were able to trace whether or not they were people who talked about their mental health getting worse or having episodes of different kinds of problems during the months following that incident. So this, I believe, is the only study of its kind. This is a really hard study to do. So we need to give a shout out to the people who did it because it's really hard and very expensive to do that. So that's why there's probably only one of them. So the part that is upsetting, but is something I think mental health professionals and researchers know we're not surprised by this finding. We just have scientific evidence for it. Is because if you live in America, and particularly I'm a black mother of 3 young adult children, then as a mother I can also relate to this, that there is a sense of when these incidents happen, first of all, we have so much greater exposure than we've ever had. I think when I look at the young people on the panel, you've grown up in a social media world. I'm a baby boomer, so I did not. So it's not that these incidences didn't occur before, but the widespread repeated exposure over and over again is traumatizing. I know when George Floyd died, about a month after that, someone put together a compilation of videos of different black men who had been killed by police. And after I saw it about the 3rd time, I remember telling my husband, who's an attorney, I can't watch this anymore. It's too upsetting. And even in my church, because I'm also a co-pastor of a church, we've had to advise people to take breaks from media because the imagery is it's traumatizing and it's over and over again. The other thing that I think both the young people talked about is you relate to the people who were killed, even if it didn't happen to you directly. So there's also vicarious trauma and this constant re-exposure. So we already know that when those incidents or events happen, depression rates go up, suicide rates go up with young people, anxiety rates go up, PTSD symptoms get worse. And again, this is not something that we haven't known before, we just now have better scientific evidence for it. The other issue that comes up, and I can definitely relate to this as a black mom, is that you have what's called anticipatory stress. And this happens more with women than men. And so I remember when my son, who's now 30, was a teenager, when he was out hanging out. So on one hand, we all know the talk that you have with your kids. So as a black mom, you don't want to have the talk. You're hoping that you don't ever have to have this talk, but eventually you have to have the talk. And that if my son was, 20 minutes late getting home, I would start getting worried. When my son was out, I never went to sleep. So if he was late, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was up at 2 o'clock too, because I was not going to rest well until he was in the room. So when one of these incidences occur, people have this anticipatory stress of when is the next episode going to occur? When is this going to happen to my child? My child's just a few minutes late. And on one hand, you don't want to hamper the growth and development of your children. You want to be able to hang out and have fun with your friends. But on the other hand, you're worried about, we have a different reality of what can happen if you go out by yourself particularly, or even with friends, and you're late. What does that mean? It means a different thing to Black families. And so there's a level of, a layer of stress that Black families have that people from other ethnic racial groups don't have.
So you know what's interesting? You mentioned anticipatory stress. The whole part of Blue with the mother and the girlfriends, and this is before the baby was even born, knowing that he was a boy, going to be a boy, that anticipatory stress happened that early. You talked about trauma. There's something that they call trauma porn, okay? And Ron Hampton, I know you mentioned that you did not even watch the video, the Rodney King video.
No, I didn't.
Of the beating, for those who might not even know what I'm talking about.
I didn't want to watch it, but I was being interviewed at WHUR, Howard University Radio, and the host, Herman, I can't even think of his name.
That's all right.
That's age. He wanted to show, it was the evening that it was released. It was releasing at 7 o'clock. And he wanted to look at it, and then I was on there with another young lady. They wanted us to respond to the releasing of the video. Well, I told them, I don't want to look at it. I just listened to it. Just listening to it, it reminded me immediately of Rodney King. But I wanted to say that this has, and that had an impact on me in terms of, I have 3 children. My oldest is 48, 49. It's a young lady. My son is the middle child. I have a daughter that's 30 years old, but my son is 38, and he's a person with autism. And all of this terms of how and what happens to Black males impacted our family. We have, in Washington, D.C., we have the D.C. Autism Society, which I have the honor and privilege of working with. We don't call the police because we've had, in this area, we've had several incidents where the police have either beaten or shot a person with a disability, a Black man with a disability. And so we don't do that. And and you would think there are 2 families in our organization that the fathers are police officers or retired police officers. And we don't call the police. And the reason we don't call the police is because of the history and how the police handles disability calls when the individual is a Black person. And so it has impacted us. What we have is a family tree. We call each other if we have to go to one of the family members' house to help her or him with their son or daughter or whatever. We do that, but we don't call the police because we know and have had that experience in terms of, so it has impacted us individually and collectively in terms of how we respond. But that fatherhood thing, I was very concerned about that, and it bothered me, and that was one thing we had to talk to, and not just, well, my son doesn't drive, but he's nonverbal. But now with my daughters, though, we had to talk because they want to drive, they want to get around. And it doesn't make, in D.C., I don't know about other places, but the police still stop Black women, young Black women who drive. They got nice cars and still stop. And if they're not criminalizing them, they flirting with them, and that's even wrong. So, you don't want to get into that either. So,
but Ron,
it's just something
you talked about some coping mechanisms that you use with your family. I just want to go back to Dr. Cherry for one moment in terms of various recommendations on ways to maintain mental wellness, particularly from those who suffer from the aftermath of violence in general, police violence in particular. And also you mentioned that you were with faith-based organization. What role does the church community or the faith-based community play in terms of these whole issues dealing with healing?
I think one of the first things that we need to all be aware that these depictions of these events are traumatizing, and I think to plan accordingly. So what I mean by that is, in any kind of mental health crisis, you want to minimize risk factors and enhance protective factors. So we know for example, if these images are traumatizing, then you may want to monitor more closely what your kids are exposed to, take breaks from it. I think also you want to shore up support. So we know one of the best mechanisms for protecting kids from all mental health challenges and also adults is support, feeling socially connected to one another, talking to each other about what happened, particularly even your young children who are under the age of 12, they see the news and they talk amongst their friends. And so as parents, we do a disservice to them to pretend like it's not happening. We need to talk to them at their level, like with what's going on with them. I think the other thing that Ron brought up is really important is we need better training for police officers, because one of the challenges for me as a mental health professional is one of the common things we tell people to do in a mental health crisis is call the police, because sometimes your young person particularly may not want to get in an ambulance, and police officers are helpful to get you to the emergency room. On the other hand, I've developed a suicide prevention program for Black youth in Black churches. We have to redo that protocol because we know that some of our families are not going to call the police. So we have to figure out what's another way to do that, to deal with that issue. And particularly, I don't know about in DC, but in PG County, which is where I live, if you have a mental health crisis that involves drugs, the police automatically come. Yes. So not to arrest, but to help in case someone's combative. But that depends a lot on training. So part of my recommendation is, and this will sound kind of cruel, but we can't just focus on therapy for young people or for people who are affected because the system doesn't change. So this has to really be systemic changes. Police departments need to train all police officers on how to handle, in a healthier way, mental health crises. We also have to shore up support, and not just in your individual homes or in your family, but also in the community. And that's where the role that the church can play. When COVID first hit, our church, and we're a small church, but our church knew that mental health challenge was going to go way up because risk factors were going up and protective factors were going down. So what we did was we made sure that we were ironically more engaged virtually so that people would have a sense of connectedness. So our church gets together more frequently now than we did pre-COVID because of that. So that's one thing you can do. But again, as Ron was saying, if you don't change the way that we are policed, if you don't change that, then we're just kind of running in a circle. It's kind of like, there's a colleague of mine who does domestic violence prevention programs, and he says that when we deal with racism, we deal with it so poorly because we basically are telling Black people, the way I'm gonna help to keep you from being lynched is I'm gonna teach you to run faster.
Oh my goodness.
As opposed to, why don't we stop people from lynching? So yes, we could teach you to run faster, but a better solution would be to stop people from lynching you. And this is the same thing here, is that yes, we could put in protective factors that help you to be more resilient and give you sense of social connectedness and give you support and reduce the number of times you watch all this stuff. But really what would work would be for people to stop, your police officers stop killing young Black people. And part of that is being trained to stop seeing Black bodies as dangerous.
Yes, yes indeed. And see them as humane. So I have one last question before we open it up for Q&A. This is a quick question. I'm gonna start with you, Tiasha, and we'll just go all the way down the line. I'm just curious about what thoughts or suggestions that you may have for a way forward.
So first, I would like to mention that our book has gotten recognized across many schools, nationally. We done won awards and everything. Basically, we just tried to pave a way for young kids to speak their mind and, speak out about any way that they would feel about any type of social justice, just like police brutality. But a way forward is basically, listening to what kids have to say and respecting how they feel, because not a lot of people do that.
I love that. Listening to what kids have to say and respect how they feel. Thank you so very much. I'm going to go to you, Aaron. Again, way forward. Suggestions for the future. Talk to us.
I'd like to say something from the classical music perspective, kind of going back to what you guys were saying about trauma porn and stuff like that. One of the ways the opera industry also seems to really only represent the black community in one light. There have been tons of black works coming out over the past couple of years, and they're all usually really sad stories. And I think one way that opera companies can be helpful in allowing other people, audiences, police officers, anyone, to see black bodies as not dangerous or not anything negative is to show our regular happy stories. Like, we can have love stories too. We can have stories that are sad but have nothing to do with them being sad because we're black. One thing about Blue is, like, man, I correct people so much because they're like, oh, you're in the show about police brutality. Like, no, this show is not about police brutality. I just happened to get shot by a police officer. But you don't even see it. It doesn't even happen in the show. And so it's really about a community of people who have things in common and how to move forward. It was one thing that Tazewell Thompson, the writer of the librettist, he was very intentional about not giving any of the characters names. It's the son, the father, the mother, because even though they happen to be black and happen to be dealing with a very black issue, there are several people who come from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds that can relate to the different things that are happening in the story. And so I believe that composers and directors that are commissioning new pieces should include happy stories and stories that do not just parade our trauma around, because we already know. So let's see something else. Yeah, as beautiful as this show is, it's beautiful, and this show has its place. It's not to discount Blue or any of the other wonderful pieces, but two things can be true at once.
Love it, love it. Dr. Sherry, way forward.
Way forward, I think I mentioned this already, but to think about doing interventions at multiple levels. And part of that is to make sure we help young people or people who are suffering particularly from PTSD or depression, making sure we get them support. Not just therapy, though. The community has to help. If we could put a mental health community center on every corner, and if we're not going to give people permission and have community norms that support that, it won't happen, so it won't really matter. And also I like what you said, Ron, about changing how we think of the police department and what their role is in the community. And it should be promoting safety for everyone and to really change how we see black bodies, but particularly our young black men as dangerous. My son is 6'1", and by the time he got to be 5'10", I started worrying, like, big, large black man. And as a mom, I shouldn't have to think about it that way. I should feel just as comfortable as anybody else. So we really have to change the world that our young people live in.
All right, thank you. Kenneth Kellogg, what are your thoughts? Way forward.
My thoughts start with self. I think we need to be honest with ourselves about how we think and see the world, and do a lot of introspective work, realizing that we're all programmed on some level to think a certain way by media, by systems. And I think we often disregard our personal responsibility and blame it on a system. I think it's really important that we realize that we create systems. Everyone creates systems. So if your perspective is screwed, if your perspective is off, how you approach work is going to be off. And how your work creates those systems that further, praise or to the detriment of other people. How we create these systems and how we create spaces, we each have an individual personal responsibility in that. Like, I'm a big believer in law doesn't change people, people change law.
Love
So,
that.
yeah,
Law
start with
does not
self,
change
do the
people.
self work.
Yeah, people change laws. Thank you for that. So, Ron Hampton, round us off here with your thoughts just before we open it up for audience Q&A. Ron, your turn. Yeah, close us up with your thoughts for the future before we open it up for audience Q&A. It's all good. Just, yeah.
I believe I do a lot of reading and keeping up with the history, and I would tell you that there's information out there, very substantial information that says about 80% of police work is non-criminal justice work, non-cops and robbers. So if that's the case, that 80% should be done by professionals. And when I say professionals, I'm talking about like the doctor here, responding to calls of service regarding mental health, responding to calls of service dealing with youth. So I don't call youth juveniles at all, because a juvenile is an individual who goes through the system, and the majority of our youth don't go through the system. Responding to calls for DV. I don't believe police officers ought to respond to calls for domestic violence, because we have systems, not systems, but we have entities and individuals who deal with that from a professional standpoint. So those professionals ought to be dealing with those issues, therefore reducing the footprint of the criminal justice system and law enforcement in particular as it relates to respond to the ills in our community. But the other side of it is that in our community, Ken, we need to be doing some assessment, evaluation about the resources in our community, and then applying those resources to the issues that are unique to our community, and therefore reducing the footprint of the criminal justice system and public safety in our community. And we can solve our own problems. We were solving our own problems a long, long time ago and doing an excellent job of it. The policing in this country is a recent phenomenon, but what we know about the history of it is violent for people of colors, particularly black folk. And so we don't need to be engaging and relying on a system that doesn't do what it is that we need to do. And we just need to think about it. It's like everything else that we do, we just need to give a little bit more thought to that process.
Thank you so very much. We've heard from our panelists. Let's give them another big hand. And now it's time to hear from you. And I see a question over here. If you can just let us know who you are, and if you're representing any entity, let us know, and then let us know what your question or your comment is.
Hello, my name is Nataleje, and as a teacher, I was going to say former teacher, but once a teacher, always a teacher. As a teacher, my first thing is to say bravo to all who played part in Blue. It was phenomenal. As a teacher, I think personally, I like to listen to the youth, because a lot of times, even in their homes, they don't have a listening ear. They don't have someone who listens to them and respects them as a person. That's one thing. So that's why a lot of times you'll see the youth going out in the street, because they feel the love, they feel heard. In addition to my individual listening ear, I was listening to PFW the other day, and I was hearing that Mayor Bowser was talking about hiring 1,000 more police officers. Of course, in my mind, that triggered, because to me, I would think that the 1,000 people that she should be hiring would be professionals like you, or even if it's half professionals and half people who are returning citizens who know what it's like to be on the streets and can actually mentor and teach the youth different ways to go. So that was one thing that triggered in my head. But my question to anyone, in addition to me personally being a listening ear for the youth, what do you think I can do as an individual to help, I guess, keep youth safe?
Okay, so what can individual people do? In her profession, she's a teacher, to help keep our youth safe. Now, so you pick up your microphone, Tiasha, so go on, rock with it.
I would definitely say just be there to support. Support is a big thing, because I know for me, I definitely need support and people that is helping me out, people that is just listening to me. I would say there's no one way that is better for youth. I feel like honestly, if you know that you support the youth and you know that you love the youth and you care for the youth, just continue to show that by just continuing to be there, continuing to help them out.
I just want to let you know that for the youth that I touch, I'm their hugest cheerleader.
Thank you for that question, and thank you so very much for that response.
I think it's important to realize that everything starts with an individual. I think often we think ourselves too small to have major change, but everything starts with an individual.
Okay.
I'll just add to that too, that the ministry in church world, we call it ministry of presence, is really important. Just being there. You don't have to be wise. I always tell people in my church, you don't need to be deep and wise and poetic and quoting scripture. Just be there. Just sometimes you can just be with someone and not even talking, but just sitting with them. I think that's really important.
Just being there. Thank you. Next question or comment from the audience. Okay, here we are. Yes, introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Brenda Seiler. I'm a reporter with the Washington Informer newspaper. Thank you for putting together this panel. My question is for Tiesha. And in terms of your writing, and what I'm going to term, do I need to start over again? No. What I'm going to term as your writing crew. Sounds wonderful. Have you all taken your book for conversations to different classrooms in the area, and have you been able to help young people understand the writer that is within them, and how have you been able to coach them in terms of pursuing their writing dreams?
I actually have a perfect example. So, when we went to Cardozo Middle School, it was a young kid that listened to our whole author talk, right? And while he was listening, he asked a lot of questions. So right there, I already respected that because he respected us enough to, keep the conversation going. So he came to us after the author talk and was like, yeah, I really like to write, but I'm having a hard time mentally, like just in life in general. And I was just telling him, like, one way where, like, I kept, like, being able to push on was writing. Like, I loved writing. I always, like, writing, like, little diary entries, poetry, anything, whenever I'm feeling down. And I convinced him and, like, tried to really push him to keep writing. And potentially, write about your life. Just sometimes that helps out. And after that, I actually got an update from the young boy, and he's doing so much better. He's not really, heavily into, like, depression and anxiety anymore. Like, nobody's messing with him at school, and he's just doing pretty good. So.
Wow. Thank you.
Feel like dropping the mic.
Did you hear what she said? Young boy.
Is there another question or comment from the audience? Here, we're down front. Well, here we are. Take my mic. Introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janari Mitchell. I'm a poet and IT professional from Southeast DC. My question is for Ron, but open to everyone. It's how can we get more of our people to see that the police have to be abolished? Because I was out at the July 2020 protests since July, like up until everything started to die down in like April 2021, I guess. So I saw everything, like fighting the Proud Boys with the police. I saw the buildings burning. I saw everything. And while I was out there, it felt like watching the videos of my ancestors getting hosed down. Like, instead of getting hosed down, we were getting shot with pepper spray pellets, we were getting mace, we were getting beaten, chased, kettled, but it was the same stuff. They just have different weapons. Just like it's the same violence in the hood, it's just different weapons. it's the same stuff happening over and over again. We got it all over social media, like the trauma porn is in our heads 24/7. Everybody see it. At first, the excuse was people don't know what's going on in our lives or people don't see it. Now, everybody see it. You can't tell me you don't know the police are beating or killing black people. Nobody can say that, but nobody is doing anything. And some people still believe that we need the police. And it's like, we do need safety, we do need protection, but the police don't provide that, at least not for us. So how can we get more people to see that this is, like, it has to stop? There's no way to reform it. You can't reform a system that was designed to be bad for us. You have to completely redo it.
Yeah. So. Well,
thank you so much for your question, Ron, and anyone else who wants to jump in.
Without being philosophical, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And last night at the session, someone said at the talkback session, he said that you cannot, and a friend of mine, David Harris, who he retired as the managing director of the Charles Hamilton Houston.
Over at Harvard.
Yeah, at Harvard.
Charles Hamilton.
David says, we've had these sessions. I got to tell you about them because this isn't something that just started doing. We've been doing this for about 9 years now, having 30 or 40 of us meet different places, talk about this, and there's a mixture of the group, community, retired, active, correction police. Nkechi has been involved in some of them, and we are thinking about bringing in some people from academia, because you need to be aware of the educational aspect of it. But the quote that David left with us is that you will not dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. And so reform is one of the master's tools, because every time an incident happened, they talk about reform. Another tool of the masters is education. If you want to talk about an overtrained component in our society, it's police. Every time an incident happens, we hear them say, well, we're going to give them some more training. And they come back and do the same thing over and over again. Because the way you change it is to fundamentally change it from the foundation, not on the top of it or the side of it. And that's what happens. They tinkle around the edges. So what it is that we're doing now is that we're talking about it in a way of, I understand what abolish means, but if I tell you that I'm going to take something from you, then you want to know what I'm going to replace it with. So we have to have that conversation about what are we going to replace it with, and that has to be a thorough, comprehensive conversation, and you need to be involved in it. So it's not me designing it for you, it's we designing it for us, and that's the way it gets done. And it's a slow process, slow and deliberate, and especially for somebody old like me, but for young people, it's an exciting idea and journey. And so this group that we're involved in, we're welcoming other people, and people will hear about it, but you have to start somewhere, and that's what we're doing.
So we have about 3 minutes left of this Q&A. I don't know if anyone else wants to reflect on that, or if we want to see if there's another question out there in the audience. Well, let's take this last question here. Thank you so very much, and thank you for that question. I'd love to hear your poetry at some point one day. You seem to have it. Okay, yes, you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Catherine Elliott. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist in the schools. And one thing that really struck me about the conversation was your mentioning how the police can be really inappropriate with people with either mental health or intellectual challenges. So my question is kind of tagging on to what was just said, of how do we develop new systems? And if you could speak a little bit more to what you were saying in terms of families developing systems that don't rely on the police, because actually I have 3 kids that I'm thinking of for Monday morning. So if I can have some more ideas about these other ways of having systems, I would just love to hear any ideas.
There are several, and I'm going to start with saying these are suicide prevention programs, so that's my area of expertise. But there are several suicide prevention programs that are designed to have both young people and adults, trusted adults in the community to provide support. So it's not that you would never go to a mental health professional, but it's like not the first step. And you train particularly young people who are like peer leaders on what the warning signs are about suicide, but also really the social connectedness part is the key. Because again, being aware is important and it's a first step, but this can't be the only step. So we could take someone like you and say, not only do you know what the warning signs are, but you can be there to be supportive and talk to someone, like you were talking about that young man, and encourage that person. Young people pay more attention to what other young people think than what adults think. And so, you know, the program that we designed for the churches, ironically, I'm not running it, someone else is running it, because I'm a grandmother. So I think, you know, I can think this up. And also, to your point, the young people are involved in developing the program from the beginning, so that if there's something that doesn't make sense for them, or like, a lot of these programs are not talking about mental health per se. They're really talking about things that are positive, pleasant. We play games, and so what we're trying to do is facilitate a sense of connectedness and belonging that they're not feeling right now. I know if I had to raise my kids again, that would be the one thing I would change. I think I relied too much on what I thought the systems would do for my children, and I should have known better, but being a hopeful person, and in some ways I think I did a disservice to my children with that, because I think the way the system is supposed to act and the way it actually operates is different. And to the young woman who just talked about that, I would encourage everybody here, if you haven't already done so, watch Ava DuVernay's documentary called The 13th. The 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment. Yeah, that's right. Because the foundation of modern policing in this country is based on the 13th Amendment. Yeah. And I do think we reinvent the wheel because we don't know the origins of what we have in place now. And it was never designed to be safety for us, ever.
Let me say this. In the history of the juvenile justice system, which is different, in the history of the juvenile justice system in Washington, D.C., there has never, ever been a white male adjudicated and put in the receiving home on Mount Olive Road or served in Oak Hill when we used to have Oak Hill, which is now New Beginnings.
They were all black.
They were all black and continue to be all black. So the system that you're talking about exists, but it didn't exist and does not exist for black youth today. That's the system we're talking about using for black youth, because they're entitled to that. The resources already exist, and we need to utilize those resources and don't have to use the police. The police have nothing positive to offer for young people. And I would just say, what we need to do, and I do this all the time because I work in the schools, I talk to them. And you greet them. First of all, when you see them, you greet them. Because like my mama said, if you didn't sleep with them, you need to say good morning to them. That's simple. I try to be simple. So, good morning. I have a conversation with them because they're searching for the same thing that the young lady is talking about. It's just a natural thing. But those resources exist already. It's just that historically we have always had them available for other people, but not for the folk who demonstrated. And now lastly, I finish with this. There was assumption and a myth afoot in Washington, D.C. for black youth. And that was the only way to get services was to get in trouble and then be incarcerated. And if they were or gotten into trouble and incarcerated, then the service would be available. Guess what? They wasn't available in incarceration because they were there for the punishment of it rather than for being serviced. So we just, again, I just think we have to think about what it is we want, and if we want something, then give them what it is that they need at the time that they need it. They don't have to go to court or be adjudicated to get some services in terms of what they need. They don't.
So I just want to close out the Q&A by just emphasizing something that Aaron said earlier, is that the opera really isn't about police brutality or police killing. It's about a family. It's about a community. It's about the hope. It's the love. It's the support of the community during this time of the anticipatory stress, I think you mentioned it, during the time of grief, and the community coming together to support the family in that healing process. And I think that that's the message of this, and I want you to give our panelists a big hand, and yourselves a big hand. And what we're about to do now, we're going to hear a treat. We're going to have a real treat from Tiaja here, who's going to read an excerpt from The Day Tajon Got Shot. And just before you do I think there's some members of your mentor group, Shout Mouse Press, in the room. If you could just stand up and let people just see who you are. Okay, Tiaja Bates, take it away.
Hello. So, this part that I'm about to read is when Ashley finds out that her father is the one who actually shot Tajon. I knew it was my father who shot Tajon. I was sure of it. All weekend I had watched the video again and again. I had seen the weird and worried ways that my parents acted. They got quiet when I came in the room. Mom was crying a lot. I knew it was him. I was feeling sad and angry because I never thought my father could shoot somebody who didn't deserve it. Plus, Tajon was so young. I felt scared for the boy because he was the one now fighting for his life in the hospital. My dad and I had always been really close, and I felt angry that he didn't tell me the truth. I felt like I needed to talk to someone. But if I talked to my mom about this, she would just get mad and yell at me and tell me to go back to my room. So I wanted to tell my best friend, Angel. She was the only person I thought I could trust. I knew my mom wouldn't let me leave because it was late, so I snuck out my window. I climbed onto the tree branch, hung down, and let go. Even though I was scared of falling, I landed on my 2 feet and ran to Angel's house. I was anxious to tell her what happened and hoped she could help me know what to do. I stopped in front of Angel's house and threw a rock at her window. She came to the front and looked down. "Angel," I yelled. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I need to tell you something serious," I said. My voice was shaking. Okay. There's a ladder around the side of the house. Go get that and climb up to my window. I'll pull you inside. I got up there, she saw my face and knew something was really wrong. "Calm down, Ashley," she said. "It's okay." I took a deep breath and let it go. "Okay, now, tell me what's going on," she said. "I know who shot Tajon." "The cop? Who was it?" I took a big gulp and knew I was about to cry. I felt so guilty, even though it was not my fault. I looked straight at her. "My dad," I said. Angel just looked at me. She just stared. "Your dad is a cop?" I nodded my head. She sounded suspicious. "How come you never told me your dad was a cop?" She said, "Oh, my bad. I don't know. You know, with everything going on, I thought maybe if I told you, you all would stop being friends with me, and everyone would hate me at school." "No, not me," she said. She put her arm around me as I wiped my hand across my face. "Ashley, I will still be your best friend, no matter what." I leaned into her, and the tears started to come. I've been holding them in for so long. "So he really did it?" she asked. "He shot him?" "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was him. He says it wasn't, but I know it was. On the video, it's him." Angel held me and didn't say anything. She seemed shocked. "I just needed to tell someone," I said. "I don't know what to do." "Not much you can do," she said. Just wait, I guess. I guess, I said. You been to see Tajon in the hospital? No. Zach went this morning. I haven't told him I think it was our dad who shot him. I don't know what he would do. He's so angry already. He should be, Angel said. It scared me, the way she said it. She seemed far away. I felt like I had to defend my dad, even if I was a little angry too. It was a mistake, you know. My dad thought Tajon had a gun. He never would have shot him otherwise. He was scared. Angel just looked at me and nodded her head. I couldn't tell if she believed me. So do you promise not to tell nobody at school? I asked. Yeah, she said. And then we looked at each other in the eye and pinky swore, saying, I promise, at the same time. I went back home. I should have felt better since I got to share it with someone, but I didn't. I still felt so sad and scared. And even though Angel promised me she wouldn't say anything, I still had a feeling that everyone in school would soon know what my father did. And then it would all come down on me.
So friends, we have one little encore for you. Thank you to the panel. We're going to ask you to take your seats because we're going to bring in a few artists from the Washington National Opera to give you an encore. So please, friends, thank you. Thank you to Asia. The arts... The arts have a role to play, as we've discussed today. We hold up the mirror, we cultivate empathy. In the arts, we have the opportunity to determine which stories get told. So we're going to give you one piece of music now that comes from a project other than Blue. It's called the Cartography Project of the Kennedy Center. This is the brainchild of a colleague who you're going to hear from in a moment, Marc Bamuthi Joseph, who's the Vice President for Social Impact and Director of Cultural Strategy for the Kennedy Center. And after the murder of George Floyd, Bamuthi invited us at the Opera and the National Symphony Orchestra to take part in the Cartography Project, making a musical map of the cities where the most infamous incidents like these had occurred, and considering the future of black dignity in the map of the United States as expressed through music. So they're going to give you a piece that's called The Road Ahead. It was written, the music, by our Kennedy Center composer in residence, Carlos Simon, and the words were written by Marc Bamuthi Joseph. While they're finishing the setup here, I want to thank Nkechi Taifa for moderating such a beautiful panel. Thank you to all those extraordinary panelists for sharing their insight. Thank you to Warren Williams, Director of Music Education for the Kennedy Center, for making this happen. And here are our artist friends. We have pianist Nicole Cloutier, soprano from the Washington National Opera Capers Young Artist Program, Katerina Burton. We have violinist from the Washington National Opera Orchestra, Kayla Moffett. We have our cellist, Igor Zubkovsky, and we have the Vice President for Social Impact and Director of Cultural Strategy for the Kennedy Center, and our poet, Marc Bamuthi Joseph.
Black coffee, back to the as yet risen day. To Today she'll leap the waters, land on coral asphalt, red knife, and a moral compass in her pocket. Directionless. She'll notice a slick of rain-soaked oil. Think of it as a trail of crying, soft-shelled candy. She'll walk towards the running colors to console them. A seeker. She can't control her legs. This is a daydream of some near later happening presently in her head. At present, she's on the island. The sun below won't rise for another hour, and someone's son is newly dead. She toasts the day with coffee, dark and bitter as an innocent suspect. She's supposed to make the leap today. Today, her job is to map the road to progress. She knows this road backward, but the road forward is hard to comprehend. It's twisted, sharp turns ahead. The woman has two trades, map making and magic. She's gotten it in her head that she wants to chart the road to progress, cartographic art to mark the arc of justice. The road forward requires a bridge over troubled water, from an island of floating history to a mainland made material by apology and recompense. Her first task is to build a bridge from past to present. The road forward doesn't begin in the middle. The path forward doesn't start at the end. She maps the path from a near beginning, puts down her cup of black coffee, picks up a pen full of black dignity, a parchment light as the giggles of an 11-year-old in the park, some papyrus, dark, like the dreams of a woman in her own bed asleep. She drags the smoke from a loose square, blows hard, parts the dust so her canvas can breathe. Map making and magic. Black girl lost in thought, wrapping her head around the direct line from a police stop in traffic to something tragic. Daybreak on a floating man-made island, a massive history set apart from the manifest destiny of cultural equity. Somebody gotta chart the course, build a bridge composed of the brick of black dignity and black sacrifice, map it to scale, legend easy to understand, a guide for travelers who believe we all should walk upright as human beings. Somebody gotta map the past accurately in music, art, makes sense of insensible things. The woman is hardly all-seeing, but she ain't blind. She knows the road she has in mind could snap like an untethered young man's spine. The road ahead could be re-thin, could dive down like a depression, like an angry hand on a soft bowstring. In her head, she builds a bridge to what lies ahead, taut and redemptive as confession. This is a daydream of some near later happening presently in her head. At present, she's on the island. The sun below won't rise for another hour. Someone's daughter's newly gone. Someone gotta map the road where her name is never left unsaid. A black woman, a mother, back to the as yet risen day. Every day gets asked to map the way to racial justice. Chart a course to some tomorrow full of anti-racists. Back to the future. She faces ancestors past. She says their names. She builds a road, cardinal directions, truth, dimension, humanity, access, latitudes of public imagination, longitudinal public policy, XYZ axis, access the ancestors, call their names, map the future. Black dignity, the moral compass. Access the road forward. Walk the walk. Thanks.